Hi everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to Good Friday. We're so happy that you could join us. If you notice, things are a little different today than they have been for this last week. So let's get started talking about why we call it Good Friday and what it means to us.
So we've been journeying through the week with Jesus, and the first time we saw Jesus this week, he was in a parade with all kinds of people, and so we have our palm to remember the parade. And then we saw Jesus a couple days later, and he was gathering with his friends for the Passover meal. And so we saw Jesus washing the feet of his friends, and then also having a shared meal, the wine, the bread, all the other things that they were eating to celebrate the Passover. And then we actually have now a different part of the story. This helps us remember the next part of the story. This is a cross, and so today is called Good Friday. And that's really confusing sometimes, isn't it? Yeah,
Really.
Sometimes people think it was actually a mistake and it was supposed to be God Friday. Have
And
you
they
ever
spelled
heard
it
that?
wrong?
And they spelled it wrong. And
They
what
didn't
they
have
were-
a spell check.
What they were trying to say was that God, this was the day that we will always remember an important thing that God did. I don't know if you've ever heard that or not, and so it really is a day where we hear about how the important part of the Jesus story, this part of the Jesus story that we hear a lot about, is Jesus and his journey to the cross. And so what we know is earlier on in the week we were talking about how a lot of people were excited to hear and to see Jesus, but not everybody, right? There were some people that were suspicious, they were angry, they were even maybe jealous, and they thought that Jesus was saying things that he shouldn't say. And they thought he was pretending to be things that he really wasn't. But what we know is that Jesus wasn't pretending. Jesus really was the Son of God, and that God sent Jesus for very special reasons. So what happened was, as a couple people didn't really like that, then they told a couple more people, and then a couple more people, and then all of a sudden, there was a whole group of people that didn't want Jesus to be doing all that talking anymore. And so they had a trial. Now, a trial is what? What's a trial?
Makes me think of judges and juries and lawyers.
And an argument.
And an argument.
People think one thing, like you're guilty, and the others think you're not guilty, and somebody has to decide.
Yeah. So at the Passover, they had a really interesting tradition where they would decide, they would take two people who they thought had done bad things and let one of them go free. And so what they did, they had Jesus and who?
And then they had a man whose name was Barabbas, and he was actually very nasty, and probably he had killed somebody.
Yeah, he had a really, really, really bad reputation.
Yeah.
They thought that he'd done a lot of things. So they put Barabbas,
The bad dude.
the bad guy, and Jesus,
The good guy.
there together. And something happened that was terrible.
Yep.
All of the people, because they were frustrated and angry and there was so much noise, they decided to let Barabbas go, even though he had done so many bad things.
I think even Barabbas was surprised.
I think Barabbas was surprised. I think that a lot of other people, once they saw what happened, were surprised too. So what they decided was that Jesus would die. That would be what happened. And so they did all kinds of different things, but what we know from the Bible is that they had Jesus carry a very, very big, heavy cross. It wasn't like this one. It was probably even bigger than he was. And they made him carry it a very long way through all the town. And this time there were people along the road, but they weren't yelling, "Yay God, yay hallelujah." It was a sad day. And so they went to a place that what happened next? What happened?
Well, they did tease him.
They did tease him? Yeah.
So I'm sure some of you guys have been teased before, and they kept asking him a question and asking him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And so to make fun of him, they put a robe around him, and they put a crown on top of his head, but this crown wasn't made of gold or jewels or nice materials. It was made out of thorns, so it was really pokey, and it hurt when they put it on his head.
So they didn't realize that Jesus was actually the king of the
Mhm.
world, and they were making fun of him. But then what they did was that they actually nailed Jesus to the cross. This is why. This cross is empty, but sometimes you see pictures of a cross and Jesus is there. That's because it reminds us of the part of the story when Jesus died. And so here's the thing. Some of his friends, they got so scared. What did they do?
Well, they really thought after Palm Sunday, waving this, they thought Jesus would take over Jerusalem and be like the new priest or the new rabbi, and all their problems would be solved.
It's like he was a popular kid, right?
He
Yeah.
was gonna straighten everything out. But then on Friday, they saw that Jesus was going to be killed, executed, and they were too afraid to even watch. Some of them had to run and hide, and they were so upset because they loved Jesus, but they didn't understand that he was doing this to show us all how much he loves us.
So Jesus was on the cross for kind of a long time. And so what happened was that all of a sudden the sky got dark. And what happened?
Well, they thought, okay, so it was the afternoon.
Yeah.
So how many times have you seen it get dark at 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Totally dark.
Totally dark. Like the sun wasn't even there.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. And so that meant something special was going to happen. And then have you ever felt the ground shake? The whole ground shook around them. And my favorite part of this story, of that piece, is that the cloth of the temple, it ripped in half all the way down the center. And when you rip something, usually you have to rip it from one end to the top, so it would do it from the bottom to the top. But to show how important Jesus was and how important this was to the world, it ripped from the very top to the bottom. And those things were probably 70 to 100 feet tall. Nobody could get up there and do it. But it was
a miracle.
It was a miracle.
And so the sky got dark. And actually Jesus said something really very important. He said, forgive them. All the terrible things that are happening right now, forgive them because they just don't understand. They just don't realize how wonderful God is. They don't really understand that I really am the Son of God. And so when Jesus died and the earth got quiet, they realized, some people did realize, that this really was.
But they were still very afraid
Very
because
afraid.
they couldn't even go get his body and bury them. And when Jesus was dying, he actually talked to God,
Yeah.
and they knew it.
Yeah.
So they were very afraid, and he died.
So then they took Jesus' body down and they actually put him inside of a tomb. His tomb was actually not a fancy one like we have at cemeteries now. It was almost like a cave.
It was a cave.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and it wasn't even his. He had to borrow it. He knew a man called Joseph Arimathea who had his grave ready, his tomb ready for him because he was older. And so when he knew that Jesus died, he asked if he could give him his tomb. And so they took Jesus's body to Joseph's tomb and left him there.
And put him in an honorable cave.
And then what happened? How did they make sure that Jesus was going to stay there?
Well,
There's a big giant rock.
after they put Jesus' body in the rock, in the cave, they put a stone in front because the people who didn't like Jesus wanted to make sure that nobody stole the body.
But this stone was not like that. It was really big. It would have
Right.
taken a bunch of people to be able to push that stone in front. And then what happened was the friends of Jesus thought that he was going to be gone forever. So there was one day that passed, and then there were 2 days. But then on the third day, something happened.
Well, and you know what? Jesus kind of gave a little sneak peek as to what was going to happen. That's why that rock showed up.
Yeah.
Because he said he was going to come back, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 3 days. And so in order for him not to be able to show that he was, that pretend that he had risen and somebody just came and stole his body, instead they put a giant rock and 2 guards outside just to make sure nobody pretended that he rose from the dead.
Super top secret security.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But that was not the end of the story.
Not at all.
What we know is that God's love for us is so big that that couldn't be the end of the story, right? So when we come back on Sunday,
Right.
you're going to actually get to hear the piece of the story when the stone is rolled away.
And you will hear who some of the first people were who saw Jesus alive after he walked out of the tomb.
Yeah, we will. We will. So, but you had a special prayer that you wanted to say for Good Friday.
Yes, I'm going to ask you to just pray with us. Lord Jesus, we need your help to understand this day. We know that Jesus is dear to you and that you love him. And yet, it was in your plan for Jesus to give everything, even his life, so that we would be able to love God. And now we know that Jesus today still gives us everything we need. The love of God is in him and is in us and will be forever and ever. Amen.
So this week started with a celebration, and today's part of the story is kind of a sad part, a very sad part of the story. But what is wonderful is when we see you on Sunday, it will be another celebration. But we don't want to give it too much away.
Right.
Yeah.
So
And that's why we eat chocolate on Sunday, because we're happy.
So a couple things you can do today. We've been building our home altar all week and putting all sorts of special things on it. But something you might have noticed about our altar here is that it's empty. And there's a tradition called stripping of the altar. And so today, with you and your family, you can go to your home altar and take down all the things off of your altar as we wait for the resurrection of Jesus. Another thing you could do is there's kind of a fun snack Emily and I've loved for years. So if it's in stock at your store, grab a roll of crescent rolls, like the Pillsbury crescent rolls, and a pack of the jumbo marshmallows. They have to be big.
Yes.
And what you're going to do is take a marshmallow, you can roll it up a little bit, can look a little bit like Jesus. Put it inside on the long end of the crescent roll it all the way up, make sure it's all sealed on the outside, and then bake it just like you would following the directions. And there will be a surprise when you open up your crescent roll.
What? Chocolate?
No, not chocolate.
I think she's ready for Easter.
I was going to say, you're ready for your
Oh,
chocolate.
and one more thought. When you have your home altar completely bare and you walk by it, you say, Jesus, I'm waiting to hear for Easter to hear the really good news.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, that is important. We're waiting.
Mhm. And even if you have a cross in your house, you can put it on the home altar, right?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
to help you remember Jesus. Yeah.
And so we have one more thing that you can join me later this evening at 7 o'clock. It's bedtime, so to finish off Good Friday and as we get ready to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, let's read a story tonight. We'll have a bedtime story, so I will see you live on Facebook to share one of my most favorite stories